So Marianne Williamson had an interview recently with Mehdi Hasan. Yes, I know. God, he's something else. And one of the things that I found interesting in this interview is that he referred to her as a spoiler candidate. I really don't like this term. I don't know who started it. And while I do not support the strategy of running through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, I don't agree with any of those strategies like anymore. I have to say, this framing of calling people spoiler candidates, I heard that when Jill Stein ran for president, right? She's a spoiler. Don't support her. That's a guarantee. You screwed over Hillary. No, I think if people wanted to vote for Hillary, they would have. Jill Stein took votes from Hillary Clinton. Did she? Even if you give Hillary all those votes, she still loses because she didn't win via the Electoral College. That's how it works. It's not about popular vote. Otherwise, Hillary Clinton would have been the president. I don't understand why people can't put these things together. But she's been referred to as a spoiler candidate. Now, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Case Study's always out there doing the damn thing. Full segmented interview with Mehdi and Marianne Williamson running from the Democratic nomination on her viability policy, being a spoiler candidate, and more. So listen to this.
Before the 2020 Democratic primaries, Marianne Williamson had already made a name for herself as a best-selling author and self-help guru. Her book, A Return to Love, won praise from Oprah Winfrey, saying she had, quote, never been more moved by a book than by this one. Williamson went on to become almost a household name in 2019 when she ran for president in the Democratic primaries and gained attention in particular for this comment she made during the second debate.
If you think any of this wonkiness is going to deal with this dark psychic force of the collectivized hatred that this president is bringing up in this country, then I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to see some very dark days.
She also made a very eloquent case in favor of reparations for slavery, and that night became the most searched candidate on Google. And although Williamson later dropped out of the race, she's remained politically active ever since, becoming popular with younger voters, especially on platforms like TikTok. And now Marianne Williamson's entering the presidential race again, this time against sitting President Joe Biden, painting herself as the more progressive candidate. Williamson recently laid out what she calls an economic bill of rights, which runs to the left of President Biden's economic policies and includes the right to a job that pays a living wage and universal.
Want to pause here for a second if you haven't seen this. And then this is similar to what Bernie had. Right to a job that pays a living wage, right to a voice in the workplace through unions and collective bargaining, universal health care, cost-free higher education. Although I question what cost-free higher education, I question if that's including private universities. I'm assuming that would just be public universities. Clean environment and health planet. I think they mean healthy planet. Who wrote this? I'm sorry. The right to a meaningful endowment of resources at birth, right to sound banking and financial services, right to an equitable and fair justice system, and the right to cultural and civic involvement in democratic life. This piece here, the right to an equitable and fair justice system, you have the right to it. It's just that the justice system doesn't have to hold up their end of the bargain. That's the problem. Just like you have a right to a trial by jury, but most people don't actually have a jury trial because they're usually lawyers who specialize in making plea deals. And a lot of times people will just take the plea bargain so that they don't have to deal with time spent in jail, paying all these fines and hoping and waiting for a trial. This is how people end up with rap sheets that may not even be guilty. They'll just go ahead and take the plea deal because they don't want to sit in jail. So you have a right to some of these things. It's just that the other side of the bargaining table also has a right to make things unfair in a way that is more opportunistic for some than others. I don't know how I feel about the phrasing, the right? I think you need to demand it. Like, that's the difference. Like, you have a right to a lot of things, but we don't really demand things in this country. And I think that's a big part of the problem. Let's go on.
Quality healthcare. But given she can't win, why is she running? Marianne Williamson joins me now all the way from London. Marianne Williamson, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know it's late where you are. Let's start with an obvious question. Why are you running against Joe Biden? Why do you believe he does not deserve a second term as a Democratic president?
You said a couple of things tonight that were interesting. You said, well, he has given more investment in green investments. He's also given more oil drilling permits even than Trump did. So this idea that they didn't bother to permanentize it. So there are a lot of ways in which the president has said that he would do things. He's made some incremental changes. I don't want to not give him credit where credit is due, although you did just now. And I think that clearly, if we really want the kind of economic reform that the people of the United States deserve, which certainly was not granted to the American people tonight with this very, very sad negotiation with the debt ceiling, then we're going to have a president who says like it really is and makes the changes that are necessary.
Let's jump in here for a little bit. Notice that she did push back on him in reference to the climate issue, which I'm glad that she did do that, because Mehdi Hasan is a snake. Like, I don't trust him. I've been saying this for a while. Some people, for whatever reason, they wanted to give Mehdi more of the benefit of the doubt. And I think when he interviewed Matt Taibbi, he showed his true colors. But I never really trusted Mehdi Hasan. I feel like he just goes where the wind blows. I don't think like he's, I just don't. I think he's a smug ass. Like, I really do. Okay. I want you to pay close attention to the way that he's interviewing Marianne in this interview. And then I want you to compare it to the way that he interviewed Matt Taibbi. So you have to understand, Mehdi Hasan, MSNBC, they're here to hold water for Joe Biden because he is the selected candidate for the Democratic Party. That's who the DNC has already decided that they're rolling with, and that's their ticket. So notice how much calmer he is with her and more friendly he is with Marianne than he was with Matt Taibbi. And why do you think that is? I want you to hold on to that, and we'll come back to that question at the end. But I'm glad that she pushed back in reference to the climate issues. The other thing that I would add is when people say things like, well, Joe Biden has done some good things. What are the good things? Because I hear people say this talking point often, but they never tell me what the good things are. You can't use climate anymore. You can't use it. You can't use that, right? You can't say the child tax credit. They took that away. So what are the good things? That's what I would have pushed back on.
I've also spent much of tonight criticizing his negotiation with the Republicans. Just to be clear, since you mentioned the debt limit, before we get to everything else, much to discuss with you, what do you make of the debt agreement? What would a President Williamson have done differently?
You know, it's interesting because when you spoke about it, there was sadness in your voice. And then when Robert Reich spoke about it, there was sadness. This was a sad night. First of all, I would never have negotiated with economic terrorists. Kevin McCarthy was not a good faith actor here. The president does not play to win. And this was a perfect example of that. So why he was ever negotiating, there were some legal scholars who said he could invoke the 14th Amendment. Others said, even if you don't invoke the 14th Amendment, there were other ways he could have gotten the money. So when you say, what would the President Williamson have done, I would never have negotiated with that man. The Constitution of the United States says that our faith will be good, we will be in good faith, our bills will be paid, and our bills could have been paid. I would not have negotiated with that man.
So I'll give her props for that one. Like, I think that was a good pushback. Well, first of all, I wouldn't have negotiated with them. I'll give her props. I don't know who's been coaching Marianne, but I'll give her props for that answer. I do think it is ridiculous that Joe Biden just caved like that. You know, you see how these stories go together, the debt ceiling story earlier and now this one. I don't understand how he was just able to well, I do understand. But the thing is that he sold out the American people just to get the deal done. That's basically what it was.
So what do you say to those who point out that, yes, you are popular with younger voters and on TikTok, but you can't win a Democratic presidential primary? You're essentially a spoiler candidate. And so by primarying Biden, all you're doing is weakening him in the general and making it easier for a Republican to beat him in 2024 in what will be a very tight election.
First of all, let's go back to the very beginning of this question, because I don't like the framing. Hold on.
With that man.
So what do you say to those who point out that, yes, you are popular with younger voters and on TikTok, But you can't win a Democratic presidential primary. You're essentially a spoiler candidate. And so
let's address that first part. You're popular with young people on TikTok. Okay, so what? I don't really care what that has to do with this conversation, right? Okay. Then he goes on to say, but you can't win a Democratic primary. I want people to pay a close attention to the words that he's using. The vocabulary, as I always say, is important. You can't win a Democratic primary. This is Mehdi Hasan telling the American people, and I don't even care, don't even talk about the polls yet. Mehdi Hasan on the sneak is letting you know they are not going to let her win. It's already been decided. Simone Sanders already told people the same thing on MSNBC. The Democratic Party is going with Joe Biden. Just like when Nancy Pelosi said the Democratic Party is going against defund the police. We're not moving in that direction, Cori Bush. It has already been decided. You see this? And I don't even want to hear it say, oh, well, it's because of the polls. Don't even want to hear that. The election's next year. Not right now. He's letting you know he knows they're not going to let her win. Now, he can't say it that way because he has to keep his job.
By primarying Biden, all you're doing is weakening him in the general and making it easier for a Republican to beat him in 2024.
That part. By primary challenging Joe Biden, you are weakening him in the general election. I would say that Joe Biden has weakened himself. The only person that really stands in Joe Biden's way, whether he has challenges or not, is Joe Biden. Let's be real here. Joe Biden doesn't want to debate any of the primary challengers. I think that's because he can't get through it. I'm just being honest. I don't think he can get through multiple debates. Joe Biden experiencing cognitive decline right before our eyes. Joe Biden having difficulty in press conferences. Joe Biden going to shake someone's hand who's not the prime minister, who don't look anything like the prime minister of Malaysia. Joe Biden stumbling over words, not really being coherent, knowing where he's at. The only person who really stands in the way of Joe Biden is Joe Biden himself. So for Mehdi Hasan to say you are weakening Joe Biden's chances, no. Joe Biden is weakening his own chances. This is like, let's talk sports here for a second. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. What if I said last night, and even though we lost and got our butts kicked, what if I would have said before the beginning of the game, oh God, no, Miami, you are really, by letting this dude play, it's the guy with the braids. I forget his name. We almost got him. We didn't get him. Anyway, I think his name is Jamie. By letting Jamie play, you are weakening the Celtics' chances for the finals. You see how dumb this sounds? This is stupid. It's dumb. They say they want a democracy, but they really want hand-selected people. They don't want a real democracy. They only want a democracy in reference to get you to come out and vote. That's it. That's what they really want. How dare you? You're weakening someone's chances. Joe Biden weakened his own chances. If Joe Biden is not strong enough to beat Donald Trump again, that is not going to be on the primary challengers. That's going to be directly on Joe Biden for the mistakes that he's made during his presidency and the fact that he is experiencing cognitive decline. Listen to what she says.
What will be a very tight election?
Well, there are two things about what you said. First of all, you said I'm a spoiler candidate. I'm not a spoiler candidate. I'm running in a primary. So you can't be a spoiler if you're running in the primary. The second thing you said was this narrative you can't win. Isn't that what people said about Donald Trump?
I got to interrupt that part right there. Isn't that what people said about Donald Trump? Yes. But Donald Trump ran through the Republican Party and they don't have super delegates. Donald Trump also had a lot of money. I don't know if that was the best comparison. It would have been different if like Bernie had won and she said, well, isn't that what people said about Bernie Sanders? That would have been different, right? But I don't think the Trump one is a good comparison when you compare it to the Democratic Party, because like I said, the Republican Party doesn't have super delegates. Democratic Party does. And you can go through the same experience just like Bernie Sanders did. You can win every county in West Virginia, and the superdelegates will say, no, sorry, we're giving it to Hillary Clinton. That's the problem when you're running the Democratic Party. So I had to interrupt there for just a second.
I will win if people vote for me. I believe that in a democracy, people should have as wide an array of options before them as there are candidates running on agendas.
But you won't. But see, that's not how it works. Because see, let's go back to this point again. Where am I? Whee. Sorry, I have a light in the way of the. Okay, there it is. All right.
If you're running in the primary. The second thing you said was this narrative you can't win. Isn't that what people said about Donald Trump? I will win if people vote for me.
No, you won't. That makes sense, but that's actually not how it works. Because if that were the case, then Bernie Sanders would have won those states where people came out to vote for him, but he did not. You see, this is the problem with the whole primary race here. One would think that is the way that it works, but that's not the way that it works. If that was the way that it worked, then Hillary Clinton would have won the general because she won the popular vote. That's not how it works. You have to win the Electoral College. In the primary race, even the people coming out to vote for Marianne or RFK Jr., etc., does that really matter in the end when the DNC has already decided that you are not going to be sitting in the White House? When the DNC has already decided that Joe Biden is going to be returning to that seat? That's really not how it works. That's the thing. We don't really have a democracy.
I believe that in a democracy, people should have as wide an array of options before them as there are candidates running on agendas. That's what a democracy is. We need to protect our democracy right now. That's obvious to everyone. The way you protect your democracy is by using your democracy. Candidate suppression is a form of voter suppression. So this idea that I'm a spoiler, no, I'm not a spoiler. I'm a candidate in a primary, and it's very important, I believe, that the president debate me, that the president debate any other people who are challenging him. At a time like this, when the fascists are clearly at the door, we should be having a very serious conversation about what it will take to defeat them, and not just accepting what the DNC has to say because a few elites have decided it's going to be Joe Biden.
But you have no choice to accept what the DNC has to say because the DNC fraud lawsuit proved that to be true. This is the problem here. There were a group of people that decided after Bernie 2016, they were not going to sit back and accept what the DNC had to say. Two lawyers, Elizabeth and Jared Beck, decided to challenge that issue. And what they found during the DNC fraud lawsuit is that, guess what? The DNC does not have to be fair to you. They don't have to be fair. Eric or Corey, whichever one in the background, if you can you find that screenshot again, that statement from attorney Bruce Spiva, where he said that the DNC explained that they don't actually have the right to do that? This took place in court, you guys. This took place. We already had this. So when Marianne says, like, you don't have to, just accept what the DNC says, according to the court, yes, you do. That's the thing. Like, more people need to talk about this. I know people don't want to. They're like, oh, we don't need to go back and revisit that. No, you do. You do. This isn't like just my opinion. This is what the court decided. Let's go on.
If you're a viewer of the show, and I don't know if you are or not, I'm very clear about the fascist threat, which is why I worry about a divided opposition to a fascist threat. And just to be clear, you're right, Donald Trump did win against expectations. But to be fair, Donald Trump entered the 2016 race and led in the polls throughout. I think there was one brief moment where Ben Carson overtook him. Otherwise, he led the entire time. You got, correct me if I'm wrong, you never went above more than 1% in the polls in 2020. So I have to ask, what makes you think 4 years later, yes, now is my time?
Well, to that point, Joe Biden wasn't leading in the Democratic primary polls all throughout the primary, but he's the president. That's what I would have mentioned to Mehdi Hasan. What are you talking about, Mehdi? During the 2020 Democratic primary election, Joe Biden was not leading the polls through the entire thing. In fact, there were multiple times that Bernie Sanders was number one. Would Mehdi have told Joe Biden to fall back? No, he didn't.
Okay, first of all, I've been up to 11% this time, right? That's number one. And number two, there is an ameliorative effect in somebody telling the truth. Somebody needs to tell the truth about this country, which the American people know. Please remember, Mehdi, 70% of the American people do not want him to run again. The American people, you have 70% of the American people who live with chronic economic anxiety. You have 64% of Americans who cannot absorb a $400 unexpected expenditure. We have 60% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 4 Americans live medical debt. You have 18 million Americans who cannot even afford to pay for the prescriptions that their doctors give them.
Agree on all of that. So what are you proposing to do that's different?
We're going to pause here for a second. Yeah, so those are things that are similar to what Bernie Sanders said. Eric, I'm ready whenever you are with that statement from the attorney. These are things that are similar to what Bernie Sanders said, right? Mehdi Hasan says, yeah, I hear you. I agree with all that. Do you? Does he really agree with all that? I don't think he does. I think at the end of the day, Mehdi Hasan and everyone else at MSNBC is going to be pushing Joe Biden just like they are now. Here's that statement from the attorney from the DNC fraud lawsuit. Because, see, some people forgot. You know who didn't forget? Me. DNC attorney Bruce Spiva. Everyone, take this home with you if you have not seen this. There is no such thing as a Democrat. The DNC just encourages people to vote for the Democratic Party. No one has any right to an expectation of a fair election. Let me say this again. No one has any right to an expectation of a fair election. This was decided in court, ladies and gentlemen. There is no democracy. When she says like, well, I'll win by people voting for me, that just don't matter. They don't have to be fair to you. If the DNC wishes to select a candidate in the primaries instead of a free election process, that is their right. Donating money to Bernie Sanders doesn't mean you thought that money was going to assist him to win the primary. You have no right to think the DNC was obligated to follow their own charter and internal policies about elections. Discussion of and any disputes with the DNC do not belong in a transparent process in a court of law. The DNC is a private association which should never be asked to engage in the discovery process or have to reveal any of its internal workings or strategies should they decide to select a candidate rather than allow a fair election of a candidate. They don't even have to disclose this with you. Okay? They don't have to do this at all. Legally, they are protected. So no, they don't. That's not how it works. And I wish people would stop pretending like this is how it works. It's not. Eric, if you want to give people the link to that, I think some people want the link to that in the chat when you get a chance. Let's go back to the video because I'm sorry, we can't just kid ourselves here.
Joe Biden, briefly explain to our viewers, what is your policy platform, briefly?
My policy platform is that the American people should have an opportunity for an economic U-turn, for fundamental economic reform. We should have the same things that every other advanced democracy has. We should have universal health care. We should have free college tuition and tech school. We should have free child care. We should have paid family leave. We should have guaranteed sick pay, and we should have a guaranteed living wage. We should have an economic bill of rights. We have a country where there has been a massive transfer of wealth into the hands of 1% of our people. It has completely destroyed our middle class, and it is now baked into the cake of how our political system operates, that we will continue to make it easier for people who already have to get more and everyone else to struggle to make it. The majority of Americans live with constant economic anxiety in the richest country in the world.
So I agree, Marianne, with your analysis, and I agree with a lot of the policies that you're outlining. The issue is, I guess, you. And you mentioned Donald Trump, spiritual advisor to Oprah Winfrey, are qualified to lead the country, to be commander-in-chief, to run the federal government, to have your finger on the nuclear button. Doesn't experience matter?
What are the requirements? That you need to be at least 35 years old, correct? What are the requirements? It's not like the requirements are you have to have time experience in the military, even though you're commander in chief. That's not a requirement. You have to have experience as a lawyer. That's not a requirement. What does he talk? What are the requirements other than you have to be 35? So listen to this. This is interesting.
Yeah. Well, let's look at what those experienced people have done for us. Look at all those experienced people who took us into Iraq. Look at all those experienced people who kept us in Afghanistan 20 years too long. Look at all those experienced people who have not raised them.
I agree with you, but also look at.
I think she's bringing up a good point here in reference to the wars, but at the same time, then it's like people can push back on Marianne and say, but you still want to give money to Ukraine. Like, instead of like trying to call for some type of peace, like you not really trying to stop and, de-escalate these wars either. Like, this is the other thing, he does not touch on foreign policy here, by the way. Have you guys noticed that? He does not touch on foreign policy. And notice he's still being much nicer to her than he was with Matt Taibbi.
Donald Trump. That's the guy, that's the last person we had, and he had no experience.
Donald Trump's problem as president was not that he had not been in politics.
He brings up Donald Trump. Hold on. I want to play this part one more time. This part's important.
Look at all those experienced people who kept us in Afghanistan 20 years too long. Look at all those experienced people who have not raised them.
I agree with you, but also look at Donald Trump.
Donald Trump didn't send us into Iraq. I'm just confused. She mentioned Iraq and Afghanistan and experienced leaders, but Donald Trump didn't send us into Iraq. And I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but I don't remember new wars starting under Donald Trump. I don't know if that was a good time to bring Trump in there when she's talking about Iraq and Afghanistan. And if I was Marianne, I would have pivoted right back to the foreign policy.
That's the guy, that's the last person we had, and he had no experience.
Donald Trump's problem as president was not that he had not been in politics. It's the nature of his character. If Donald Trump had had a different kind of person who surrounded him, Donald Trump would have been a different kind of president. And, the founders did not say that in order to run for president, you had to have political experience, because they were leaving it to every generation to determine it for itself. What are the qualifications for a leader at this time? My qualifications are that I've been around enough to see how this country operates. I've been around the very rich and the very powerful.
I wouldn't have even gone into all that. I wouldn't have gone into all that. I'm sorry, but they don't ask other people these questions. In reference to, I felt like he tried to do the hook, line, and sinker. He was baiting Marianne when he brought up the qualifications. And if I was her, like I said, I would have pivoted right back to the foreign policy and pivoted right back to these wars. I wouldn't have even gone into, well, this is what I've learned during my lifetime, and here's my qualifications, here's my experiences. No, don't take that bait. I wouldn't have even gone down that road. The requirement is that you're 35, at least 35 years old. Like, this is ridiculous. Give me a break.
I've been around the very disadvantaged, do not have money, do not have power. And I've seen how this country operates. I've seen it up close. And I am in this candidacy saying what everybody knows. This society is rigged at this point.
But everybody says that. Everybody says they've been around poor people. They've been around working class people. My friend who was, on disability, I helped volunteer for some organizations, and I fed poor people, and I've been around. Everybody has that talking point at some point or another when they're running for office. But the thing is, if you haven't been in that situation, you don't know for sure what it's like. If you've never been poor, you really don't know what it's like. You know what you see on the outside, but you don't know the stress and the trauma that comes from being poor. You don't know the stress and the trauma that comes from being working class and not knowing how you're going to pay this bill just so you can continue to put food on the table, just so you continue to pay your rent, how you're going to pay these medical bills. If you don't have that experience, you really do not know. And I'm so tired of candidates making this talking point. I knew some poor folk. That doesn't work anymore. It really does not work. Yes, okay, yes. But after you knew those poor people and you work with those poor people and you helped care for those poor and working class people, you went back home to your neighborhood where the people aren't poor. That's what people have to understand. I feel like she fell for, I would have not taken that bait.
Society is not even operating as a real democracy. We have already moved into the area of oligarchy, whether it's oil companies or defense contractors, insurance companies, big pharmaceutical companies. They run this country, Mehdi, and you know it. I've heard you say it.
And I said to you, I agree with you on a lot of the policy stuff. But let's talk about you again.
Yeah, he said he agreed. But like, this guy is just, he's such a snake.
Yeah, and you mentioned character. Politico in March interviewed 12 of your 2020 campaign staffers who painted a picture, quote, of a boss who can be verbally and emotionally abusive. All 12 former staffers said you screamed at people till they cried. 3 said you threw phones at your staffers. You've denied all those allegations, I know, called them categorically untrue. And yet last weekend, your deputy campaign manager resigned, and then your campaign manager resigned back to back. Why is it, Marianne, that so many of the people who work for you don't seem to like working for you?
Well, how come so many do, number one? Number two, I've never thrown a phone, okay? Have I raised my voice? Absolutely. I've never thrown my phone at someone. I raised my voice at times. And I'm sorry, you know, if you were tried in a court of law, who is being prosecuted has a chance to bring up their own witnesses, etc. When you're tried in the media, they can say anything. If I, in raising my voice, have offended anyone or made anyone feel bad in any way, then I am sorry. But that doesn't mean that I think that the narrative that was painted in that picture, in that article, was in any way true. And once again, things like through a phone, never.
Okay.
Here's what I would have said in that, example, because she's talked about this before in other interviews. I would have said, it's really interesting because this is what media tries to do. They try to come after these candidates that are, quote unquote, not running in the status quo lane or really a part of the establishment, so to speak, or they want to push for issues that are going to help the American people. They try to write smear articles about them. I would have brought it back into Mehdi Hasan's court and talk about how even the network that he's a part of is dishonest most of the damn time. They back the State Department and they back these talking points and they go against anyone who is against those talking points. That's how Mehdi Hasan got that job. That's how he gets to keep that seat. And that's what people have to understand. So the thing is, like, if I was Marianne, I would have brought up the fact that, of course, they're trying to smear me. They're going to do those things because I am running against a sitting president. I am challenging Joe Biden. So bring it back to that. They did that to Bernie Sanders. We don't know if I don't know if that stuff that happened with Marianne is true or not. But the thing is that bring it right back to the point and the problem about the mainstream media. And I say this because Bernie Sanders did not do this. Bernie Sanders was heavily attacked and smeared by the media, and to his face, they smeared him on these shows, on The View, on MSNBC, and Bernie tried to be diplomatic and just to stay calm and just answer the questions. But Bernie Sanders should have called out the media, both in 2016 and in 2020, and he wasn't willing to do it.
One final question. We're out of time, but I got to ask, just to be clear, yes or no? Will you support the Democratic presidential candidate in 2024, whoever it is, against the Republican candidate, whoever that is? Yes or no?
You know, Washington, in his farewell address, warned us about political parties because he said people could be more into their supporting their factions than their country.
But you running in a political party, Marianne. Like, this is the part I don't understand. These quotes, like, stop telling me about these dead people. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just like, this is something I feel like one of my professors would have said, like an undergrad, like George Washington said, President Roosevelt said, so-and-so said. I don't care. Stop telling me about these dead people. Like, seriously, this is a long time ago. Why are you still listening to what they're saying? The thing is this, okay? The question is simple. Are you going to support Joe Biden or the Democrat nominee? That's a yes or no. And I watched her and RFK Jr. kind of dance around this question, do the tango around this question.
support my country. I will do everything I can pray about a fascist takeover in this country as long as democracy delivers on its promises. Democracy is not delivering on its promises. I will do whatever I can to help the American people vote for an agenda by which democracy will deliver on its promises. That's the way to keep the fascists out of the White House.
So when she says keep the fascists out of the White House, does that include Joe Biden? Isn't Joe Biden supporting fascism as well? You see, so let me answer that question for you. If she feels that Joe Biden is also a fascist, and I had this conversation with Dr. Cornel West as well, and I told him I think Joe Biden's also a fascist because he sat up there and lied to the American people, sat up there and virtue signaled to the American people after George Floyd died, and then turned around and said, we're going to give the police more money. Crime Bill Joe, implementing legislation that directly harmed Black communities, particularly Black men. Yeah, I say Joe Biden is also a fascist, Mr. I'm good friends with Strom Thurmond fascist kind of person. But if Marianne does not think that Joe Biden is a fascist, then that means that she will support Joe Biden. Wake up, people. This is what I want you to get. Think about what she just said. If she does not see Joe Biden as a fascist, what it doesn't seem like she does, and if she thinks that fascism only exists on the right, then the answer to that question is that she will be supporting him. Very simple. I don't like the dancing. I don't like the tango around these questions. Just answer the question. Now, in a recent poll, also shout out to Case Study QB for this as well. This is May 17th to May 20th, a CNN poll conducted by SSRS. Look at this. First choice for 2024 Democrat nominee. 60% say Joe Biden. 20% say RFK Jr. 8% say Marianne Williamson. And another 8% say someone else. I really do believe this organization called No Labels is going to try to come in and grab this someone else 8% by trying to get someone like Joe Manchin to run. Based on what I've been reading, I think that might happen. But look at the numbers, people. The fact that Marianne and RFK Jr. together have 28%. And the Democratic Party is telling you there will be no debates. If you still support this strategy, somebody needs to organize some type of collective action to get people out in the streets to push back against the Democratic Party for this. And don't look at me. Honestly, it really should be the campaign teams. Campaign team for RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. They need to be pushing for a debate to happen. People are coming to commentators. People came to me and Kim Iverson and all these other people saying, why don't you guys try to put something together? That should come from the campaign. They should be pushing for that, not us. So the fact the numbers don't add up, people. And the Democratic Party is telling you there will be no debates. Now, people are saying, well, Trump had challengers too. Did Trump have challengers that were polling at 20% and 8%? Not from what I saw. 15% equals debate stage. When we talk about third-party candidates, 15%, you on the debate stage. So he polling at 20%. This is crazy. This is fucking crazy. This is why I say you cannot dance around that question. Ask me that question. Sabrina, we can go to the next part 2 of Type VNC, Eric. Sabrina, if you do not win, will you support Joe Biden for president or the other Democrat nominee? No. It's that simple. People would be very mad. Oh, people be mad at me. People say, how dare that Sabrina? Did you hear what she said? The fact that she won't even support the Democrat nominee. Now I just sit in the back and smile and say, that's right. If I wanted to support the Democrat nominee, then I wouldn't be running against them. A hot mess. Very simple. Let's go to some of the comments here. Monarch says, let Marianne and RFK Jr. debate. Their campaign teams should be pushing for that. Should be pushing for that. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Thank you so much. That helps me with the algo. Thank you. Let me know how things are looking on Rumble, Eric. I don't know. I'm a little nervous. It's my first time over there live, so I hope it's still up. Hope I didn't mess anything up. Muhammad says, I don't see foreign policy. That was another one. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Dems and Republicans invented spoiler for fear votes. Exit polls show third-party voters wouldn't vote or vote another third party if their candidate didn't run. I'll write in someone's name. Thank you for the super chat, Paula. You've really educated me on how corrupt and unfair the DNC is. Thank you. Thank you, Paula. I'm trying to reach as many people as possible about this. People need to know this is all a sham. Thank you for the super chat, Lawrence. Ballot access is sharply skewed in almost all the states to give the edge to the two major parties. This is true. Deneen says, how does a corporation get to intervene in our elections? Because they own the parties. This is why we need publicly funded elections.